All right, so we're off on astronomy, right? Like we know about that. That's a pretty simple stuff, sort of thing, right? Like we're sometimes orders of magnitude off. We know about like Bernoulli principle gases for interstellar winds and intergalactic winds and stuff like that. And we just recently finally admitted to the world that, hey, guess what? We were really off about this interstellar gas total constant just outside of our own, Oort cloud, right? And we're like, if that's even a thing, we don't even know if there's an Oort cloud, right? Then we were like, wait a second, that clumps up, that has electricity, it's moving, it gets less dense, it then can have virtual electron states within inside of, either the chemicals or individual elements. There are different levels of neutrons and neutrinos. We don't even know all of those. Like if they're super neutral to the point where they're practically like super fluids to basically everything that we might try and use to catch a glimpse of them, then all we have to go on is anything with antimatter and a dense enough version of that to possibly find something, right? Then it's like, wait a second, we're also off about how much our gravitational interference, so gravitational wave interference, happens in terms of how efficient it is, the wavelengths that they're at, how that plays a role in any given total chemical reaction, how ionic states start to form, and electron beams to arcs to, all this electricity movement, electromagnetic, so on, so on, so on, right? Like, we're really, really hard pressed to say that we know. You know what I mean? But that being said, I do agree with a lot of what they have, right? It's that thing where it's like, yeah, no, you're right, but also we're going to tell them a lot of things that we're wrong about, and a lot of stupid stands are going to be like, "Rawr, source, you're right." You know what I mean? Like just straight defending science when like the actual like people that do it know like how fucking off we can be. And still it like looks good at first until you know that like people are normal people, and then they go, that is like 30 fucking years possibly, it's not, that's hyperbole. And they're arguing with like how many calculations they have to do for all these interferences and the possibilities, and oh my god, they're endless. You know what I mean? Right? That's a whole thing. So it's like that's scary, But like we're gonna move on from that because I got a YouTube notification from for Dr. Kristen, talking about how there is no second Earth, right? That's just in lockstep behind, and I'm like, you're right. There would be no fucking way. There's no fucking actual way that works at all. 100%, right? Like we can for sure know that we don't need to like suggest or whatever, or anything like that, right? But then it's also like, wait a second, like Theia, I'm on the side of Theia too, right? That's the planet that hit us to help form the moon. Okay, it's like, wait a second, on that one we know thanks to how Venus is much more slowly rotating for its day versus its orbit. Same thing with, I think it was Uranus, I forgot what it was. Could be Neptune. Forgot. Point is, it's on its side and it's rotating, right? Like, very weird, very odd behavior. It really shouldn't do that. It could be electromagnetic to how it was formed and it slowly clumped, and then, like, it just happened to be far enough away gravitationally that, like, big old electromagnetic, filaments, right? That is, like, the rest of the solar media here. As our star was forming and we started getting these rings, it could have ultimately caused more of a diagonal, and then it collapses and it creates a sideways rotation, right? But then it's also very likely to still be just an outside our solar system, kind of planet that started heading towards us, and things smashed along the way, right? Like that's a very interesting kind of side to our observations, right? And it's like, we should see this other stuff if there is this electromagnetic, and it's like, you're wrong, actually. You do see it, you dumb fuck. What did you just try? Like, here's the moon. I'm mean on that one. Like, here's the moon, it's full of these charged particles, right? Just full on. And we're like, we can't ground that and absorb some of these charged particles and create a bunch of electricity. What? No, you definitely could do that. Yeah, there's light emittance here, or like it absorbs it and it puts it into a potential light emitting state, right? And then it finally emits light when there's something that's there. Then we have like compression waves, interference stuff, for like sound wave stuff, right? And we go, that's really cool, but it's like, wait a second. Unfortunately, that also means that they can put them into virtual states, kind of almost like a sonoluminescence in a way, right? And like that one's scary, or it can elicit light. Like, so things can go through and pass through, and interfere, interact. And then all of a sudden we get a bunch of light, and we get a bunch of, chaos, right? So it's like, when we know about star formation, we're finally starting to put in electromagnetic activity into how that forms. It's not just mass and boom, ubermensch, bang. You know what I mean? Like there's some waves here. There's some like, I might even get a brief amount of continued, who may be, right? Under that kind of pressure, perhaps even, entanglement, these waves of node and antinodes and right dimensional, third dimensional kind of intersectional points that start to get us to that more promised land of, we get a little bit more fusion perhaps before we might not have believed it to be, right? To even that can clump up, heavier elements and start, forming those rings, right? Like we know about, right? Except then that creates their own charge differences. They can start trying to accelerate and then decelerate, or, there's not enough friction from those electromagnetic waves or electrostatic there as well. And so it tried to, but then and it shot itself off to someplace, or more quickly arced and then heated up before it hits. You know what I mean? That kind of thing, right? That's all very interesting stuff because it gets to insanely high heats here, right? Now, the reason why I'm talking about this, though, is because remember that planet that I was talking about? That, like, idea of a planet? That's like, well, what if it, ultimately as something comes in, okay, right, we have heavier elements here. We have our lanthanides, we have our radioactive elements and isotopes. And, in the beginning birth, it happens to sort of clump and then that kind of thing, right? It becomes quite porous. We get a lot more of these cave systems. It's very low reflectivity. It keeps a little bit of this, helium, right? There's higher density helium sort of thing. Okay, and then we end up having more of these light wave interference and virtual states for our electrons to be in. And we already know lanthanides are more likely to constructively interfere up or down, or even destructively interfere. Then, because Mercury is where it's at, and we see that it should have gone somewhere with Venus, but it's actually kind of keeping roughly within these distances between them, but it's still moving. It off gases and it constructively interferes with that light that's already going through because it's hot enough. We get the nice little heat mirage. We get the constructive and destructive interference models. We get a lot of electrostatic, electromagnetic, and it's to, let's put it this way. It absorbs a lot of electricity, effectively. There's a lot of charged particles here. And so its version of a temporary aurora borealis, that's not really going to be able to do that, you know what I mean? And it happens to have a lot more of this dust and this cloud, sort of thing. It doesn't weigh nearly as much as you might expect, right? Even though it's heavier because of the heavier elements, it's not Earth size. It's not going to be what that is, right? That's not what I'm suggesting, right? So it's like, all right, so it's a little bit spikier, a little bit porous. It happens to have the good old-fashioned refraction, diffraction, and reflection. It's far enough away, the coronal mass ejections, plasmas, charged particles, other, various, like comets and asteroids actually are a part of our observed data that actually still continues to be just fine with it, and so it sneaks and hides into our observed data as being a constant that is not a bad constant. You know what I mean? Let me make sure this is Still recording. So, like, as a result of it being apart, it sneaks in, it hides within our data. It doesn't look like anything's amiss or wrong and things are going to move one way or another. It's actually moving exactly like we expect it to because it's there doing something, right? Now, we see this because of this huge, massive amount of plasma that moves in these huge, massive convection currents with these huge, massive electromagnetic fields, along with the gravity that's there, and then the gravitational waves that have a pretty consistent effect, right? Both on Mercury, but Mercury to its, orbit close to the star, right? It's not a lot, but it churns it and it changes it. You know what I mean? And so because it's moving its orbit, you're right. Like, it's going to eventually, I fully agree with her, right? But it's like, it's going to move relative to Venus and Mercury. Like, it's going to do that. You know what I mean? It's going to basically be invisible to all of our observations. Yeah, it's not going to really emit anything that isn't already going to be emitting that direction that way, right? So any light and gas and neutrons, neutrinos, that kind of thing, it's cooled off. It doesn't do the gamma ray burst. It doesn't do any of these fissile fusion-like activities. There's nothing there going on. You know what I mean? It's small enough. It's heavy, but it's not that heavy. You know what I mean? It's not like even Mercury levels of heavy, right? So, like, it's really just sort of sticking around as this kind of clumpy bitch. Just too small, not really got any extra to it. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't hit it just right in the right area, you're not even going to gravitationally see it. You're not going to see any real light from it. It's not going to reflect any light. It basically bends like a big old lens just the right way to not be seen so well. You know what I mean? Now, the reason why I bring this up is because 100% you can make math and observations work that way. And you, for what it's worth, won't be able to challenge it. I just brought up something that you can't challenge. See what I mean? But it's like, that is another problem that you have to address. Like, you have to shine light. You have to do something to effectively make really certain there's nothing there. However you can ultimately spot it, because it can't be perfect. We're not talking about a perfect, right? We're talking about it's pretty much evened out and averaged into a given area, right? And a given good at doing it enough that our current observational methodology is pretty shit at being able to catch it. You know what I mean? Right, so skill issues on us. All right, planet. Fucking let's go. You know what I mean? Like, fuck you, basically, yeah. However, the other side of that then turns into same thing for all of the interstellar, all of the intergalactic, and even inner supercluster. Right? So we end up getting into this other argument of how much dark matter and dark energy here did we miss? Right? Because it's like, wait a second, are we just placing in this value because we're skill issue having dummies that we can't observe good enough effectively, right? Like, we have way more mass actually than we believed possible. It's far more dense than we thought. Just because it's moving, it looks less dense in terms of a particular type of observation here, right? It still has that mass and it still has that gravitational wave constant that's heading a particular way. So it gets obscured. Right, like that LIGO data then gets curved, but it also gets curved a given direction, and it interferes in a constructive manner. Right, then we end up having light waves. So we're traveling to the light. That's the thing, right? Like, we know that we're blue shifting light towards a point where we're going to travel to it. Right, but then we have compression of space and time. Now that technically doesn't always blue shift it. Okay. That can also redshift depending on how we're moving, but of course that means it travels less distance and it should blue shift, right? So, like, that's a blue shift of light usually, but not always, depending on how fast relative to each other they are, right? Then there's the interference patterns. So if it goes through that way, starts to redshift, it'll get destructively interfered with, IR, microwave, radio wave, so on, frequencies. So we usually see just the strongest of the strong photon wavelengths, right? But then that gets interfered with and even made to be constructively interfered with what's there on that kind of travel path to us, right? Then we have that compression wave of gas and interstellar and so on media, as it slows down, then it gets captured and it gets brought in more rapidly to us. Now that gets elongated, right? Now that acts like a change of our gravitational mass constant. Now that gives us a change of interference, and that can redshift it back down or blue shift it back up by having it see more mass on its way in, right? Now that gets us more blue shift. That'd be great if that's always the case, but it's not. You have to look at it like a big fluid of pressure waves. And if you don't, then obviously it's going to be harder to calculate for that, right? But that's kind of what that's about. But it's like, okay, wait a second. Here's the other issue. Electromagnetically says, fuck you, I don't care. It literally says, and you were wrong even harder now, person trying to even challenge what I'm saying. Because you didn't understand blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, okay, shut up. First off, blah, 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 do shuck. Shut the fuck up. First, foremost, you already know LIGO's so fucking massively sensitive that even things under the tectonic plate affect that shit. Okay, then you have an increased gravitational mass because the gravity well here keeps more around, and that continuation of that movement in a given orbital plane then improves its density structure as well. But that means more things interfere with that light and more things as well in terms of that level of neutron and neutrino alteration. So we have pressure waves of those neutrons and neutrinos, right? Like that's a thing that you have to deal with. Then you end up having to deal with the total level of Unron, which is much higher where we are. But that doesn't mean anything over there, or it could be far more. You don't know. Which is like little tiny virtual or quasi little spin, and we're blue shifting up a given amount of frictional field coefficients at a quantum level, basically, for big, large astronomical, and it's a thermodynamic property. You know what I mean? Which, no, an entropy doesn't exist as a particle force. Why? There's room for it to go into more easily there. That's a lowered resistance. I was like thinking about that for like ionic exchange, like that kind of thing where it ionizes gas. But it's like this is more conductive. So if field-to-field interaction happens, it then becomes more ionically willing to ionize, right? And that's information that travels to and from, but that of course starts the process of moving things, and then ionically speaking, it starts to ionize. That means it already was lowered resistance. It definitely did that. It used a lowered resistance to make another lower resistance to then further lower resistance movement of given particles and energy. Now, if you know that, then you go, wait, then that same thing with photon and that same thing with basically everything. And it's like, yeah, it's always doing that. And that means no matter what, you have entropy as a force carrier and even particles themselves, which you can't get around. When that happens, you then go to, wow, we didn't add in multiple little fucking movement dimensional, parts of our entire equation for how reality works. Our theories of multiple different types of multiple different views and observations of fields of study here do interact. There's no way that they don't. You're just not very good at that, right? You're not very good at using that all the time. That's okay. That's a skill issue. You have to fucking get good. Just get good. You know what I mean? You have to do the work, right? Like that's what that is. So it's like, all right, then it's flat. So knowing that it's now much less likely, okay, that you observed cosmic microwave background radiation and everything correctly upon a given plane of movement of which you're traveling relative to these other planes of movement for this given type of electromagnetic radiation, of which can only be viewed a particular directional space-time kind of graph here, movement-wise, traveling, right, speed and so on, then you've always missed a given actual admittance of light, right? Like you've always been missing a certain direction and a certain total value of that, right? Now, you can try and say that noise and like, hey, it should be off by this, but you've already realized, hopefully if you got this far, how off most of your other previous measurements are, which you already agree you get not so great at. Like those can be orders of magnitude off already right now, right? But it's like if you add this in, then further, it's even an extra step exponential wise to doing that. You know what I mean? So it's like you might now have an entire universe off of dark matter and dark energy. Like the matter is there, it's just very diffuse and it's or moving. The amount of energy is really just the amount of friction, interactions of chemical, right? And so on for all that versus the bigger meteor things that are in between that we usually like to look at, right? That then creates their own type of kind of almost like a Wi-Fi hop, you know, of various field-to-field interactions in between these larger structures, you know, solar system, galaxies, what have you. As we already know that there's the conveyor belt thing. Like, I love the title, but that's not really technically what it means. But then it does actually kind of mean that, doesn't it? You know, for how it moves and travels huge amounts of mass of this given element or composition of various chemical compounds, of which, depending on how they're diffused and how much there is, that massively alters how much it interferes or doesn't interfere, interacts or doesn't. You know what I mean? Like a gas full of lanthanides, right? But it's like, wait a second, that gas full of lanthanides means you have no fucking clue, right? Like that it's there. You just got rid of it because I'm looking at it the wrong telescope. It can't see any of that light wave. It might constructively interfere it if it has enough lanthanides in a carbon-based version, right? But it's like, then that means that interference then changes it more to, you know, what mass spectrometry tells us is carbon, right? Except then how heavy is that carbon? That also changes that. And those densities then also lens and interfere, meaning refract, diffract, reflect, right? And even lens is gravity itself as it goes through it. Which means you never you never observed that interference well enough to be good at saying that I'm wrong. So that then gets really rough, doesn't it? To be like, well, we might be off by an entire universe and then some. And we don't actually maybe have it correct in terms of how many interference curvature points for how that starts to look like it only goes back to this one singular point of emitted light that then is mostly as a result of us always traveling to that. So we're always traveling towards this given point already, right? And that's a thing that can make it much more likely for us to see it heading backwards like that. No, we for sure are looking backwards. I agree with you. 100%. We're not seeing real-time information. That's for sure the case. It takes time for photons, all that, to get to us. That's not changing, okay? However, what it means is, are we actually correct about where that point and how that looks like to us? Like, it could be the Big Bang is different than what we assumed for its acceleration for the Big Bang to inflation point, right? Or are we seeing inflation be faster than it is? Are we seeing, you know, those kinds of things incorrectly, right? And it's likely we are, which is a problem, right? Yeah. So rough, annoying, but also we got to do that. That's a thing. Like fuck us, basically. Right? You know, like, screw this, you dummy human, tiny meat guys, just fucking nothing. You know, I thought we did pretty well. Like, well, you know, fucking, you know, universe said no. We learned more, and then we were like, fuck. That kind of thing. Which is like, yeah, no, that's happened. That's gonna happen some more. That's for sure the case, right? Like, we're not getting out of that one. Fucking wonderful, right? But it's like, whenever somebody challenges that, okay, You know, like the assertion that a person like myself could be right. It's like you have to remember that there's a lot of things that others that are doing the work are simply just not saying. They're keeping, quiet so they don't have to be a part of the conversation. You know what I mean? Like that person is unlikely to be the scientist that's a part of that. They're more likely to be a person that is just not going to like somebody saying something isn't like that, like the others that they kind of sort of worship almost, you know, anything that they might say. Okay? But it's like you're a normal person. I know that you're full of normal people that do a lot of good work as best you can, and it's hard to get a lot of that work done. And it's coming from a person that's disabled that can barely do like the work that he has to do. Okay? So it's like I'm dealing with a lot. I'm not in a good place for what it's worth. But I wanted to record this because it's like that notification made me think. I'm like, wait a second. Yeah, this is part of my Lord reality where like there's another fucking like thing there and it'll eventually just move the wrong way and swing out. Like I don't know, it might have just been fucking unfortunately for us, not in a way where it's coming through that it ever did anything to that, and it certainly doesn't weigh enough to really matter too much to it, I imagine. Right? So that one sucks, and we already know about this other planet that I think it was either behind or ahead of us. I forgot what it was. But it apparently had the reflectivity of asphalt or something like that. Basically very, very dark. And it swung by us. We had no clue. It was a random rogue planet. We had no clue it was there until we just luckily just lucked out fucking pointing it that way, right? And like that's scary when you think about that. Like it's just like it's there. It was just there. We didn't even notice it was heading that way. We didn't. You said that we could see outside of our arc light. We'd see like a planet, man. You said you had us convinced you would see it. Why didn't we see it yet? Until it's basically right on our ass. Well, that's. That doesn't sound great. I'd like you to, you know what, man? Could you just at least be more realistic for a second with us? Right, and I'm also saying that there's a dwarf planet coming to hit us, right, for another thing, but like that's eventually gonna, if it was there, it has to eventually go wrong. You know what I mean? Like it has to eventually get yeeted out of its kind of roughly always moving orbit, right? Like it's like, hey, we didn't see it because the Earth, blah blah, right? Yeah, but it's also because it's moving and it has all these other characteristics attached to it that make it fuck you levels of hard to see. You know what I mean? So like, and if that's the case, then a diffused trying to form into a protostar, it kind of is a protostar, right? That then happens to have enough orbital kind of like, other planets that are basically just another version of, they're obscured with enough density of cloud in the area. They don't really travel fast enough through it to really elicit large amounts of like light and frictional, light therein, right? Or interaction therein too. Then we have a hard time being able to fucking say we can see it. Gravity-wise, it's not going to look very different than anything else, and even if we aimed perfectly at it, it'd be really hard to know. That means there's a possibility of many, many different planets and planetoids to a lot, actually, that we're off on, and the amount of dark matter can massively go from, hey, it's like this huge percentage to possibly much, much smaller. Same thing for dark energy, right? So like that dark energy is able to swing far lower, which then turns into more field-to-field gravitational wave sort of interaction, interference stuff, which then could full-on remove it. Possibly. It's not really fully, like we're off already, so we don't know. I don't know I say that there's still some of that, but that really turns more into like other interactions that are a little bit more possibly exotic. I say possibly because like we're just not seeing them on a large scale when we're talking about like a little box or whatever, right? Like it's like a very small amount of this thing, but when we're talking about like this kind of thing, light and everything going through, then of course it alters the amount of energy and how we look at it, right? Which then can for sure maybe help gravity to decrease the significance of that movement, right? Like momentum, so as it swings out, it gets more friction, so field to field, and it slows down as it diffuses through and captures some, so on. And so we actually keep ourselves in a galaxy more than we believed previously, as my dog has all the water, which I love. He's a good boy. But the reason why I'm talking about that is because, my lore in reality happens to, and this is not a character bit, okay, so this is genuinely what I believe, right? But like, I really did predict after a point. Fucking, you can't... an exacting verbatim of many multiple fucking seconds, minutes, and hours every day of your life over a decade on. What, you know what I mean? And like, then you just get like, hey, that memory triggers. Fucking, I wish I had eidetic memory, man. I really do. Like, I would have used that. I would have used that so hard. Like, but luckily I talked out loud like I am now. I just didn't record it. But it's like, here's a bunch of different ways that can be recorded, right? Either, corporation, Google, so on wise, to hackers and that was an election kind of cycle, stuff like that. So, election interference, sort of people to, maybe they got caught up with NSA, Computer Security Agency, adjacent to whatever, right? And then they worked with them. They might have that information. It's just kind of around to even our own governments or other governments, right? Hacking and looking in, okay? We all went through, and we still do this, where we cover our, web cameras, right, for a reason, right? Like, we unplug things for a reason, because we can't really stop them. Like, we've never been able to really stop them, you know what I mean? And that's not even getting into the fact that, like, hey, encryption's supposed to be super, super robust. And it's true on your own device, right? But when you want to send something, that one's its own problem, because then that's key to key. And so as it breaks that apart and tries to encrypt and randomize a key, you can actually break out that key and what the key is supposed to be. So as it hops, meaning there's no direct one-to-one connection, right? It stores a certain amount of information, either volatility-wise in the CPU or DPU, which is data processing unit, to any number of those other things. And if you can get a hold of that, well, you got access to their encrypted chats. You don't really need that much. So if they ever really connect, it's one of those scary parts of like, you can 100% break their encryption. You don't even need at all to spend that long doing that. But it has other things there too on my YouTube channel for how to break encryptions and work back in a really crazy way to brute force seemingly random things. Mostly because if you don't think about it too hard, it sounds like I'm just saying things that are like gonna be calculate wise not too hard to do, right? But it's like the smaller and smaller the chunks here, instead of like this was a light wave or something, or like in one astronomical which bro. Yeah, sure. Right, it's like, wait a second. Those are hard calculations. Any given amount of light wave interference within our own atmosphere is difficult for us to do, right? So imagine on a scale the size of our universe trying to do that. So it's like, I need to make this faster. I need to get better at it. I need to figure out that math and break Heisenberg. I need to break fucking fluid dynamics. I need to break thermodynamics. I need to literally ruin and wreck their shit in and make it and do my bitch and so many more. very long-standing. You can't beat those things. This is what we observe them to be, shit-wise, as our shitty shit is, as bad as we are with our non-skill, is at observing them. Right? And I'm like, bet, bitch. I'm new. I don't care. I've got time, and fuck you. You're old news. You're dead. It's been 100 years, fucker. I'm gonna try. You think I can't train harder? You think I don't know more? I'm gonna go. Fuck off. Yeah. And then I worked really hard on that, for what it's worth. To the point where, yeah, I did break them. The problem is like, now it's just instinct. Right? Like, I brute forced so hard in my own head, I don't know how to put to paper what I'm doing sometimes. Like, what is this stupid thing that you're talking about? You mean this? And they go off and say it's like, this is a merging amplification wave, because that's literally what it is. But it's like a third dimensional moving merge of an amplification wave of this density of luminosity interacting as well as they are talking back and forth photons. They're more a wavy signature like this, right? Versus like that. But this is this same light wave interference, or light wave frequency, right? But that light wave frequency, depending on how you observe it, and how close and how quickly, then gets changed into like this own, almost like a sheet membrane, but then it gets, dumped into this own field to field, and then this is a spinny filament kind of thing that then moves like this whole thing. And I was like, how do I describe this to you? Other than like, it's like this chunk of a packet of internet activity that has like this amount of reverberation and, kind of diffused sort of seemingly chaos, but like it's really just moving like this and it trails off like this because this is interacting like that and so on, which I call them interactions because interference is to prevent. Interaction is to, hey, how you doing? You know what I mean? That kind of thing, right? So I never really understood their words because they were wrong to begin with. And amplification, because of course it moves it to being more luminous or a different wavelength, right? Like you either want more luminosity, more of those photons perceived, which means they're denser in a given area, or there's more of them in a larger area, right? Or there's a higher wavelength frequency, right? Which is not always the case, right? Amplification can be very different and interference is very different. So I kept using the word interference, but like, which one are we talking about? I can interfere fucking like a bunch of different pressure waves inside of a gas and get them to become denser and move more quickly through something. And so it looks like it's the same density, but like the total size volume of this tube shrink down to this size. But it's moving faster, right? But it's the same mass, right? So it's like, light wave no do that. Yes, it does. Photon meant more. More photon. Smaller space, though. Nuh-uh. Yeah. It then curve like this now and head towards that thing you want. Right? And it's like, well, exactly. Like, what do I tell you? You know what I mean? Like, and then I diffuse out like this as bell curve cone structure, then diffuse and interfere correctly to then make all laminar almost coherent, but then actually still spread. Make sense yet? But you fuck what? Yeah! Like, what? But no, apparently I'm not allowed to do that. But like, no, you already did that. Those are already things that you already experimented on and have shown to be, that's what you're doing. But like, what are the words that I need to use so you understand it? Because you're slow and I don't know what to say to you. Right? Like, I'm already there. How do I explain this to you? Right? Like, you're seeing finally, here's electromagnetic, electrostatic, chemical activity of bioorganic, life forms, which is really just, I'm talking about a forest here. You know what I mean? But it's like, hey, and then that gets stored by this given non-volatile and volatile memory system of RNA and compound movement with inside of different cellular structures, right? Which is basically what our eyes do. You know what I mean? But it's like, hey, how did they make this fucking tree leaf flower thing look like a bird? Because it fucking, what? You already know that they can see a little bit. What are you talking about? And then as that moves, like those can create chunks, kind of like our brain here, for a given area, section of our brain that's good at certain processing for either occipital lobe or, prefrontal cortex, so on, you know what I mean? Right? But it's like that works as well for big structures inside a forest and, the entire environment. But then scale that. Think about like galaxy, bro, and movement of our water, computers. Hey, look at the water computer, calculate for us. And I'm like, so we already know about pressure waves. We already know about phononic transistors. We already know about, hey, instead of mechanical qubits, which, yes, we're finally getting there, right? We can actually use larger, thermodynamic type qubits. So like think like we use for chaos theory mathematics and our weather modeling, a chunk here, and then it interferes and interacts, right, enough that we get this change, but it was in a potential state to drop out and turn into this. Now, we don't see it that way. We see it as this big chunk. But that's not what it is for a larger scale. See what I mean? So it's like, that is a quantum computer now. Then you can use virtual states of, what is that motherfucker? Pauli's exclusion principle. Right? So it's like, here's a pressure wave that's a vacuum. Right? But it's a potential vacuum. It's also a potential field-to-field interaction and so on. So like, depending on how it lines up. Right? But then as it moves through, you can create so this one's wonderful, and it's actually on my YouTube channel as a stream, right? But they set up like the equivalent here of the old test of boiling water in a very sealed system, and then it all condensing off and being the same amount of water somewhere else, right? And it's like, that's what they did with fields and a electron or a proton or something. And you can't get something from nothing, and then that's another title for one of them. But effectively, it's just a bunch of fields that capture the UNRA and other given radiation and then amplify it up to the point where, hey, guess what? You got energy, right? So it's like, no, you were wrong. You can't get energy from the quote-unquote nothing. That's a thing. Same thing for, I destroyed the informational wave of an electron or something, and then it gets stored as a value among all the other fields and the setup of the materials involved, right? And then as I put it back in, as I dump a little bit more energy into it, it pops back in as an electron. It's like, that's a thing that's going on universe size-wise, right? But it's like, hey, guess what? Yeah, that's a thing I use extensively in many of my sensors, detectors, fucking materials sometimes. You know what I mean? But when you think about that, it's like, you can do that with your brain. That's the thing you can do. You can move your brain like a brain wave, like you have a constant static tic-tac-toe of your heart. You got brain wave, right? Like theta, alpha, so on, right? States. Then you have like how that ionic exchange, cascade, resonance between one point to another, occipital lobe, hearing, kind of wise, over to the front, and then calculate, and then back, and then do the action in a recirculatory. I move my fingers, right, relative to something else that's also there being calculated as a given informational value of what I'm wanting to do. But this is real time, but then it has other weighted neural networks here of stored memory around a given vocalization, so like movement type. And those are other areas of our brain too, right? But that means we're always calculating a particular way. That's a part of my God operating system. That's in there. That's binary math too. You know what I mean? So it's like a lot of this is there. Nobody ever bothered to look. You know what I mean? But it's like, hey, when you say that you can interfere waves and sense and because that would change them, that's a sensor. Your brain can become a sensor. Your very body can become a sensor, like all the plants, in a forest. Which effectively removes a large percentage of what people believe can be done. If you work really hard, you can get your body to see and sense that correctly. But if you're not good at it and you never work at it, then it just seems like poppycock bullshit to people. Because, of course, they're fucking skill issue having little ninnies that think you cheat. Because they're bad at it. And they have to cheat. If they just got good and worked at it, maybe they could imagine. Maybe they could see. Maybe they could finally put that informational change through the processing that we already have and interpret it to mean something that we already can sense and know the meaning of. Because those are related informations to if then that. So if I touch this and it does this, then if then that. Right? That's a thing. If I blah 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 like this, it means blah 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 like that. You know what I mean? So I said blah 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 blah, but that means I have to move and vocalize like that. But that's automatic. You don't think about every one of those things, right? So it's if you automatically start doing certain things, what would happen? You already have senses, right? You already have these things. So if you interpret it through that, what do you end up doing? But having a perception that others can't have, and calculation speeds in ways others can't do. What happens when they get mad? Well, they get sad a lot and they say, no, you can't do that. So it's like, get good, stop cheating. You know what I mean? Like, just get fucking good. Why don't you just know things? Why don't you just do that? Granted, that's often the character bit I do, right? Because people just think I'm lazy or, like, hey, you need to do this thing that you can't do, and I'm just ignoring all the parts about you that effectively are working your ass off to even try and do what you can do with your disability and more. Whole thing on that one. But it's also like, hey, and then, Republicans over here in their government and whatnot. I'm in America, so, they just fucking shit on and invalidate your struggles and so on. So it's like, I'm going to do that to them. You know what I mean? Like, that's the character. That's the whole character bit I do a lot. It's like, fuck you and fuck off and why don't you just do this? Hey, since you're so godly, why don't you just, whatever, right? See what I mean? But they don't really seem to like that, and that's kind of the point of it. It's definitely to get them, and they get all upset. They show off how narcissistic they are. They can't ever take any, you know what I mean? Like, real easy shit. But then I love doing that to people that seem to think, kind of dissonantly, that they're different than that. And it's like, wait, you didn't want to account for, like, I am disabled like this. I can't really do that. You know what I mean? Or why is it that it's wrong of me to treat you like a normal person? Like, if you want to parasocialize, basically, get a lot of people to look at you, the host, as you say one thing or another, then why is it wrong to treat you like a normal person and at you? You know what I mean? Why is it wrong to suggest that any of these hackers could be there, let alone any number of people that might, suggest something to you, may have gotten it from me in all these other ways? Why is it wrong to go, hey, you're also super immature often with me or others, even yourself, and that's a trigger for me. I can't do that. And, I also don't have that money you think I do. But for some reason, you just think I can do that with that kind of money I somehow magically now have. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of stuff like that, and then they get angry and upset. You know what I mean? I can fucking tell that they're one little quip or another with inside the video is clearly what it is for. You know what I mean? Like, they're there saying some shit, and it's like, I'm gonna let it go, right? But then when they keep doing it, it's like, fuck you. Really? That means you definitely watched that and you definitely know what I'm saying and you're a dick. Fuck you. Like, you're bullying me and you're trying to get away with it by effectively making sure most people don't know that you got it going on and saying that because of me. Most people aren't going to look that deep into it. You know what I mean? So it's like, you're fucking bullying. You're bullying me. That's for sure what that is. You're being a piece of shit. That's what that is. And, like, now I look like a paranoid person because, I interpreted it wrong. Yeah, it's really easy when you're that big, and it could be almost anyone, and there's that many fucking comments, and most people aren't even going to look through them all. You know what I mean? So it's like, fuck you. I know what you're doing. You're a dick. That's a dick move. That's a fucking real dick move. Yeah, that's fuck off, basically. And so that's why I wanted to make this kind of video and, do the lore and reality thing. Don't know if I still have a place to live for what it's worth. There's that too. But hey, that's a day in the life of. I started off the day seeing another notification from another YouTuber. I think it's pretty cool, but then all that stuff, and then that, and whatever. Right? Oh, right. I want to talk about this. So the tires, not changed them. Finally aired them down to 19 psi in the front and 14 in the rear. Want to know why? They are definitely meant for fucking trucks that are way heavier than my subcompact SUV or crossover or whatever you want to go with. And it needs that level. Like I was at 38 psi or something, right? And it wouldn't flex. And I finally noticed on the dirt, on the trails, the contact patch, I shit you know, is probably about this big, right? Like it's like fucking 3 inches maybe, and it's a 215. Right, so it's like that's really just the middle that I'm getting, or maybe like the inseam. And looked at it a little earlier today. I might need to rotate those tires. That's a thing, but I've aired them down quite substantially, right? From 38 psi, which it's off by like 2 psi around here, So that's closer. Well, I had it at 40 anyways, but that's closer, yeah, to that. I think it's a PSI and a half or something similar to that. But the point is, yeah, that's what I've done, and the front, so the steering wheel felt stiff, right? And I just thought because they're heavier, bigger tires, right? Because who wouldn't? I mean, they're slightly bigger tires, right? And that's kind of what that is. So it makes sense, should I really worry? That kind of thing. Yeah, apparently I should have. They're definitely meant for a much heavier vehicle. Finally, after driving it today, and I aired them down previously to like 23.5, and then I did it again. These are actually the full 215. They're finally getting proper contact patch on both sides on the outside there, right? The front end isn't this weird stiff thing, so that means it was slipping most likely because it is too high of a tire pressure, and the traction control was turning on along with the differential, so limited slip diff that's there, was trying to fight it, and it was loading up the suspension and making it too stiff. You know what I mean? So it's like finally it's gripping and it's not seeing this traction that's, I guess, just not enough to really make it bing and say, hey, traction, it was lost or something, right? So, but it was enough to make it load that way, right? And the reason why I kind of really noticed that was I was going up a hill and it actually picked up. Like before it would slip and it would get stiff and it just like bogs down, and I kept going, man, this really maybe isn't, I mean, it's definitely the right tire choice. Like it's phenomenally better on the washboards. Wow, isn't it just much nicer? It has way more grip than my old crossovers ever did for the tires. Yeah, and for what it's worth, it's pretty close to the original gas mileage I had, because it's pretty close to the same tire size, right? Like it's pretty close, and it's only slightly heavier, despite what it might seem like. It actually is only slightly heavier, right? So it's like, well, maybe it's just something I have to put up with, like what it is, right? Finally aired them down. Finally got them to hook up going up that damn little hill, and it was a massive change, a massive difference. And before, I kept thinking what they were talking about for shifting side to side for the tire, so the total thickness of the sidewall, right? Like it being a little sloshy or whatever, was maybe overblown because I never really felt that. But now I know why. Now I definitely know why I felt that. It has basically no weight on that damn tire. It is like almost nothing. And it's definitely built for like actually a heavy vehicle. And I got the tires I did because the pizza cutter kind of things still keep the same tire contact patch. But when you lower the pressure, you can go even lower before it'll unbeat itself, and it'll actually deform more, right? So I saw that online. Now, granted, they were different tires, right, and all that. But it's like, well, that makes sense, and that's actually a tire I can buy, right? Like 215 by 85s or, something, right? So it's like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Why not? But now I know a lot more about what was wrong with it, because they're 15 psi in the front. Rear here. So 15 psi in the rear and 19 in the front. I would never go that low, ever, with any kind of tire, most likely, right? Like, I would just never do that, because, what? 19 psi and I finally get full contact patch on my tread? Like, what? But no, it's fine. It's actually just fine, yeah. Like, genuinely, it finally, like, gives a little bit. It finally, like, I got a little bit of that sloshy, sort of up and down, even when I stop, kind of, holding up, that kind of thing. Like, it's actually doing it like it's supposed to. It's actually supposed to have the sidewall, flex, right? So, and I finally actually had the full 215 be presented on the dirt there, and that's a big deal. I'll tell you that much. It doesn't shake nearly as much, which it wasn't before, but yeah. I kept thinking that going down to like 22 or something psi was like some big, huge, oh my god, I should never do it. You know what I mean? But like, this thing's really a lot better once I go down to 19 and 15's in the rear. Like, it has like just more than enough meat and sidewall stiffness, I guess, to handle it, and it really deforms just fine for me, and I have like next to no weight on the damn thing, I guess. So it really requires almost no tire pressure at all. It won't unbead any faster, so that's good. You know what I mean? And I had a good time doing that. Turned off the traction control, put on the fake cement because it's a CVT. But went on a nice little trail and wanted to see how much it would hook up. You know what I mean? Like, see how much it would, in a gravel kind of dirty situation, what it would do. It'll hook up, actually. It's pretty fun. I gotta tell you, I made the right choice on those tires. But the tire pressure is a big deal, and I probably need to finally put on those ring spacers for the bearing, the wheel bearing, I got the aluminum ones instead of the plastic ones I have now currently, just because they're probably going to have to deal with more of that, heat and so on, stress and strain, which definitely are worth it. For sure, get ring spacers. I know it seems like they'll flex or whatever, and it's kind of like this weird, what does that really mean? Take them on, or take them off if you have them, and then run them, make sure you got the right torque, and then put them back on, and you'll notice the difference. It's definitely, for sure, like how it actually vibrates and for sure grips the road and allows for you to put power down and all of that. Like, it's just not moving in any real way. Right, and that little tiny shimmy might not seem like a lot, but it means a lot, apparently. And definitely worth it. It's smoother, it's better. You should do it. That's all I can say about it on that side. Evolux are not bad, it seems like. I mean, I'm going to have to tell you, I don't know. Long term, I got them on eBay. Right, like I got them on eBay. That's where I bought those, because they were cheaper and I could get like a PayPal, pay as you over time kind of thing going. Because there's no way I was going to be able to afford them. And same thing with help from parents on that one, sort of a thing. Right, and the wheels are Craigslist. They were just a lucky Craigslist buy that have a 38 offset. I think they're meant for like showing off for like other, like a Mazda Miata or something, right? And they're more for like a street kind of racing sort of situation. But this is not going to weigh that much, and it's certainly more than strong enough for me, right? So like, it's all good on that side. It's just, and I like the look. It's weirdly different as it is, right? Because it's just like this big fat honker of a tire that's like a pizza cutter when you look at it from the rear, but like it grips just fine. It's the all terrain that I need, because I actually do have to deal with even snow sometimes. Well, we do have to deal with snow up here. That's pretty bad. Snow, mud, muck, all that kind of stuff. But I'm also on trails with my dog. I take him hiking with me every day, so I have to have something to help me with that. And it was just brutal going off on. You can go on these trails with a standard, sedan, subcompact sedan. It's really, they're not that hard, to do. But like if you go 5 miles an hour, it'll take you hours to get somewhere. You know what I mean? And up here, I'm like I'm 7,000 feet up, but it can go up about 2,000 more feet here, and it's a big deal when I rip off that little stupid front cover for the air intake. Like, I was looking at that and I thought, they didn't just do that, did they? There's like this little stupid plastic cover that has like these little holes, right? And then it has this other air situation that goes from that side over on the driver's side over, and then over to where this other side is, right? And it's like, what is this for? Is there some induction sound or something? What the fuck is this for? Like, what is this for? It doesn't make any sense. It's a cold air intake. It's right there ramming, or at least trying to, and you clip it in the little tube thing. It doesn't really have a chance to ram. It'll blow the rest of it out of the tube, so it's really only getting whatever it can intake, sort of thing. Whatever that amount is probably not much, right? But it's like, it helps it get closer to like sea level, and if I can keep up at least a little bit of speed, it helps out in these mountains to maintain power, and that allows for me to get better fuel economy. So, like, I'll take it, yeah. And now that I can actually travel at a speed that before would have been and I just slide, and I had to turn off the traction control anyways, so that way I didn't just slide to the point where it possibly go off a cliff. Honestly, it rides over that thing and gets stiff enough that it just is actually scary. It's kind of like driving on ice, but like the worst kind, because it tries to and it hops around, and really quite dangerous. Not a fan of that. I would not suggest going with that. I got a front wheel drive though. The guy told me it was all-wheel drive, and he gave me some money back from where I bought it. I bought it off of Craigslist, so I had to go meet him. But yeah, I should have done a little bit more work on that one. You know what I mean? It's a selectable all-wheel drive anyways, and it would definitely help out here by a lot, which is one of the reasons why I was thinking about getting a fucking semi-automatic and getting the Rally Art Evo, because it's a 2-liter 4B11, and they have a T version, but it's like I need a little bit of lift for my tires. I gotta get rid of the CVT. The CVT sucks, and it needs more power, but like, it only gives me more power when I get into a higher RPM. I'm not a fan of that. You know what I mean? And I need to get different compression rings to really kind of, it's an older engine anyways, and the transmission, because I've done over 135 something thousand miles, right? Well, I need a transmission fluid change, but it's also like, yeah, it's nearing the end of its life. You know what I mean? Like, I think if I keep maintaining it, I can get into the 180, but like by that point, that's my tires effectively. Like, I've run my tire to the point where I need to get a new one, or new tires, right? And I would need to get a refurbished engine anyways. So I'm